Hey everyone, it's Elsie here from the customer care team, and today I'm going to be talking to you about filters and how you can use them in Keela to play around with your data, or more importantly, to learn about the information that you have stored in your Keela account. What are filters? So you've spent all this time making your contact data beautiful, or you've imported your donation transactions into the system. You're ready to start using volunteer activities to make data-driven decisions. Yeah, you're at the point of taking off. But you find yourself wanting to ask your data a question. How many contacts have donated last year but not this year? Or who are your top donors? Who's RSV'd on a form? Who has a specific custom field value? And filters are how you get an answer to that question. You can filter your data by specific bits and pieces of information. How can filters help you? So you can use filters to specify the data that you would like to see. So you can see here on the left, I've got 69 contacts, and maybe if I apply a couple of filters, I might reduce that list down to 37. So it's a way to take a full list of your contact data or your donation data, apply a couple of filters, and tell Keela to show you what remains or to show you whatever matches those filters. Where can you find filters? A couple of different places. So you can find them in contacts on the contacts tab or the segments tab, which is what I've got as a screenshot here, just by clicking on the filters button that's the button with the arrow pointing at it. But that filters button you'll see throughout the system. It's in fundraising, it's in reports. Wherever you see the filters button, it means that you can apply the exact same steps that we're looking at today to that data. What kind of data can you filter? There are so many different bits and pieces. So we've got them in kind of categories. You can filter individuals, organizations, so your people or your companies. So that includes donors, members, volunteers, any of the contacts that you have logged in your Keela account. You can filter. There's transactions, so that includes donation payments or revenue payments. So you're actually filtering the payments themselves, not the donors. The donors are considered contacts, but if you're looking at transactions, you're looking at the payments. You can filter volunteer activities, so you can filter by specific volunteer hours that you've logged or volunteer start dates that you might have logged. Membership subscriptions, pledges, and interactions. So those are just the categories that we've got, and each of those categories has a bunch of different filters within it. Where should you filter from? Great question. So I've got a table here to talk through it, but we have a much more detailed description of this in our Where Should I Filter From article, which will be linked on this on the knowledge base article that you're accessing this training video from. So check that out if you want more information. But when you're considering where you should filter from, the important thing is to consider what kind of data you would like. So for example, in this table, I've got what type of data do you want? And number one is a list of contacts. And you can get that from contacts, segments, or reports. You can get a list of contacts with some calculations, reports. So reports is where you go for everything plus calculations. And one thing I want to point out where I see some people kind of misinterpreting this is that they want to look at a list of their donors. They want to contact their donors or reach out to their donors, and they go to fundraising and they filter transactions to find the donors. And so this is what I mean when you should think about what you want at the end. So if you're wanting a group of people, if you're wanting to contact your donors, think, oh, my donors are contacts, they're people. So while I don't want a list of transactions at the end of this, I want a list of contacts. So this is what I sort of mean. Think about what you want and then go from there. So just really think about it in terms of, do I want contacts, people? Do I want transactions, so the actual payments themselves? Or do I want volunteer activities? Kind of like that. Okay, so in order to kind of give you an idea of how they work, what I'm going to do is run through a couple of scenarios in the Keela system. So here's scenario one, actually. I think filters are learned best when you see them in action. So What I'm going to do is run through a couple of different scenarios in the system so you can see all the different variations or ways that they can be used. And then at the end, I'll show you where you can head to find a list of filters that you can start using. So we'll start with number one. We'll start with a simple one. We'll work our way up from there. I want to send an e-blast or mass email to all of my contacts who have subscribed to my newsletter. So you might track this newsletter with a custom field, or you might just have anybody who's opted in your Keela account gets your newsletter. But for this scenario, I track my contacts who fill out my Keela subscription form by putting them into a newsletter tag. So I've got everyone who I send everyday emails to, but only those folks who are in the newsletter tag in my Keela account get an email. So in your case, think of this as how you can filter your contacts by a specific tag. Let's take a look at it in action. Okay, so I'm jumping into Keela and I'm going to head to contacts because I'm creating a list of people or organizations. I know that's what I want to end with. So I'll work backwards from there and head to contacts because that's where my people or organizations are listed. Because I want to save this list as an e-blast and use it later on, I won't do this from the contact screen. This is a great screen to filter from. If you're just wanting to get a couple of people, you're not wanting to save the list, you just want to filter and take a look and then leave and come back and you don't need that kind of filtered list again. Or if you're wanting to export the data, so you can filter a list from here, export it, and it won't be saved. But in this scenario, I do want to save the list that I'm filtering and I want to send an e-blast later on. So segments is the way to go for this. If you're ever wanting to save the contact list and send an e-blast to it, that's when you head here. Okay, so from in here, I can create a new segment. Let's call it newsletter, very inventive. Next, and then this is where the magic happens. So here you can add new filters. And like I said, there's a bunch of different ones and you can expand them all just by clicking on these little drop-down icons. So I can see all of the filters here that relate to contacts. And it's things you would expect, for your contact filters. It's filtering by that personal information like email address, country, any custom fields that you might have in here. We've even got some of our intelligence smart tools in here. So donor score, smart ask, things like that. You can check those out in our knowledge base. And then any custom fields or tags that you have down here. So those are all your contact filters, but there's others as well. If you want, you can filter by all fundraising transactions. So that includes donation data, revenue data, or just donations and revenue by themselves. So what this means is that, remember, I'm still in contacts. I'm still filtering my list down to be people at the end of the day, but I can filter those people by their donations. So I think this is where some people might get a little bit caught up. They think, I want a list of donors, so I have to filter donation data, right? But really you don't. You can filter contacts, filter your list of donors or your list of people, and then use the donation filters in here. So my recommendation is there's so many filters and I can't possibly go through them all, is to come in and just have a play. You can't break the system by playing around with these filters. So just come in and see what's available and see all the different ways that you can interact with these. But I'm getting ahead of myself because remember, we have a scenario here. There's some tags I need to filter. So I'm going to click on this filter thing, this filter field, and I'm going to search for tag. I can just go in and select tags, and that kind of changes how things appear. So the next thing, as soon as you select a filter, so if I select another filter, the same thing happens. As soon as you select a filter, this little box will appear. And what this does is it lets you change the logic of that specific filter. And if you're ever unsure about what this logic means, my tip is to sort of read it out to you, like read it out to yourself. So show me contacts that match all of these conditions. So contacts where the tag field contains any of, and then you can select your tag from here. So if I selected newsletter, it would only show me contacts that match all the conditions, where in this case, the condition is their tags must contain newsletter. So if I go ahead and save that, I'm going to return 31 contacts. So these are all the contacts who were returned, the contacts who match those filters, who have a tag of newsletter. If I change my mind, if I want to make an adjustment, I can edit the filters in here. Maybe I want to say newsletter and snail mail letter. I want to see all the people who want to receive marketing communications. So I can filter by that. So it's actually increased it. We've got 33 now. One thing to note is that we have this condition logic up here. So if you switch it up, you can change it to any. So this comes into play when you have multiple filters down here. So for example, I want to see all those people who are subscribed to my newsletter tag. I've manually added them to this tag to keep track of them. But maybe I want to only include those folks who have a primary email address. I can search for primary email, and I want to see all those folks with a primary email address where that field is filled. So it doesn't matter what's in it. It's either empty or filled to me, and I want to see where it's filled. And if I see show me contacts that match any of these conditions, what it means is that it'll either be a contact who is in this tag newsletter or a contact with a filled primary email address. So I would switch it back to all. I want people who meet both of these conditions or all conditions that I've listed down here. So that's another way that you can sort of make things a little bit more specific to your needs. And we'll go through that a little bit more in the next scenarios. But for the moment, here's my segmented list of all the people who are in that tag. And what I can do is head back to this segment later on and use it as a recipient list for my e-blasts. Next scenario. Each year, my organization holds an annual fundraising gala. And I sent out invitations to this gala via email, and my contacts completed a Keela custom form to RSVP. They clicked on a button in my e-blast, it took them to a form, and they entered their details and said, yes, I want to attend. And when they did this, when they RSVP'd, I set it up so that their response was stored in a custom field on their profile, a custom field that I've created and added to my Keela account. And this is something that everyone can do. But what I'm wanting to do today is to find out how many guests will be attending so that I can organize the food for the gala. So what I want to do is filter my contacts by a specific custom field value, and in this case, by those people who said yes in their RSVP. So let's take a look. Okay, so I'm back in Keela, and again, this time I think, what do I want to end up with? It's people. I want to see a list of those people or those companies who've RSVP'd yes. So I head to contacts. Of course, you can always head to reports. Reports lets you filter on everything. So if you're ever unsure where you should go, if it should be, do I go to segments? Do I go to contacts? Do I go to fundraising? You can always just go to reports because that's where you can sort of do everything. And I'll be showing that later on. But for the moment, I'm back in contacts. Now, after I filter down this list and I find out who's RSVP'd yes, I'm actually wanting to export that list because I need to provide it to my communications manager, and she's going to follow up with them. So instead of going to segments, I'll stay here in contacts. I'm wanting to create this filtered list and then use this export button afterwards to export the data. If I wanted to save the list and come back to it, then I would have created it in reports, because any list that you create in reports you can save. But I just want to quickly do this. I'm not worried about coming back to it later on, so I'm just going to do this in contacts. And because I'm not going to be sending an e-blast to these folks afterwards, I don't need a segment. Okay, so here I am. Let's click on filters and we'll start adding them. So the first thing I want to do is look for custom fields. So let's jump into the custom fields here, and then I can select which custom field I want. So I've got all the different custom fields I've added to my account. You might not have as many as this. I hope you don't, because my contact profiles have a lot of data on them. Maybe yours is a lot neater than mine, but we can jump in here and we can work it out. So let's go. AGRSVP is the name of the custom field that I created and linked up with my custom form. So I'm wanting to see folks who have this field. So the custom field is AG, who either have yes or no, because those are the types of responses that can be stored in there, is empty, or is filled. So remember, is filled means it doesn't matter what's in there as long as there's something in there. So this would be a way of seeing who's filled out the form, regardless of what they put. They might have put yes, they might have put no, it doesn't matter. It's just going to show people who've got something in that field. Alternatively, is empty is going to show me those people who have this custom field that don't have any data in it. So they haven't said yes, they haven't said no. These are sort of my truant contacts who haven't kind of gotten back to me yet. But then lastly, the most important one, I think, is just the actual values themselves. So whether they've said yes or whether they've said no. So now show me the contacts who match all of these conditions, who have a custom field called AG 2020 RSVP, and the value in that field is yes. Show me those. I'll filter. And it's narrowed down my list to 36 contacts. So John McClane, Willy Wonka, only 2 of the Stooges have all said, yes, I'm going to be coming to your annual gala. So from here, what I might do is click on this export icon, and I'm going to choose a couple of columns. Let's say full name is what my communications manager wants. They want email and a phone number. And then let's look at some custom fields I have that might be useful. Oh, special dietary requirements was a value I had on that form. And then just the RSVP will be in there as well, I think. So we'll go next. And it's my RSVP. Yes, I'll save that. And it'll automatically be available in my export history once it's ready, once the report has been generated. I can also access it from my notifications up here as well, just by clicking on this, and then it'll take me here and I can download it. But in summary, that's how you can filter just your contacts tab really quickly. You'll notice that once I've come back, my list has been reset. It hasn't saved. Of course, if I wanted to save it, I would have done it in reports. Okie dokie. Next scenario, my accountant would like the total donations received for a fiscal year. They're wanting, basically, they're wanting a spreadsheet of every single donation that was made between a certain time period. And let's say it was 2020. Let's take a look. Okay, back in Keela. So this time, I think what I want to end up with after I've finished filtering is a list of payments, and specifically donation payments. So I don't want to go to contacts this time. I want to head to fundraising. If I wanted to save my filtered list of transactions and use it later, then I would go to reports. But this is a one-time filtering. I'm going to jump in and head to transactions. I just want to filter the list really quickly, get the spreadsheet from my accountant, and be done with it. So here I am, and very similarly to contacts, I've got this big long list of data. So I've got 2018 transactions in here, and I need to find a way to drill down on that so that I only see those donations that have a date received within a specific time frame. So you guessed it, filters is the answer. I jump in here and I'll add a new filter. So we'll start off with fundraising transactions. And the first thing I want to do is filter this data by transaction type, because my accountant was very specific. They only want to see donations, not revenue. And at the moment, this transactions tab shows me both. So I want to filter by the transaction type field to contain any of donations. So I'm only going to be looking at payments where the transaction type equals donation. I can filter that way. and I get 1,018. Alternatively, what I could say is does not contain any of, and I could say revenue, which just works in the opposite way. It shows me all donations that do not match this filter here. And I get the same data. So that's a cool way of seeing understanding how that kind of filter logic works. So that's my first one. I'll switch it back to contains any of donation. And the next was date, the date received. So we'll look at not the date created, that was the date that me or my team member logged this transaction. We're going to be looking at date received. And then there's a couple of different ways you can use the date filters, which I think is really cool. You've got the is relatively option. So what this does, it lets you choose a dynamic time. So maybe I wanted to choose last year. And what that's going to do is Keela will automatically just show you all donations from the previous year, no matter what year it is. So it's 2021 now. They're going to be showing, Keela's going to be showing me all donations from 2020, the previous year. So this can be a really handy filter if you look at your donations monthly. So maybe you want to have last month, and you could save this as a report even. And I'll show you how to use reports in a little bit. But then you could jump in, at the turn of each month, and you'll know that the list will automatically update itself as the dates progress. So that can be a really cool thing. Otherwise, you've got the option of selecting is equal. So the date received, and then you can pick a specific date and it'll show only those donations from that specific date. Is not equal, which is the opposite. It'll show donations from any date except for this specific date here. So let's say the 1st of January 2007, it'll show me every donation except any on that date. Is between, so this lets you choose specific time frames that you'd like to look at. So because I'm looking at 2020, I would change this to the 1st of January 2020, and then I would change it to the 31st of December 2020. And that would show me that I have 67 transactions that were received that I need to give to my accountant. Then there's is not between, which is really handy if you're wanting to exclude a specific time frame. So if I wanted to see all the donations that were received before this date and after this date, I could use that. And then you'll recognize this, the is empty and is filled. And here's a spoiler, all donations that are logged in your Keela account have a date. So the is empty and is filled filters will just pull all of your transaction data in this case. But I'm wanting to look at is between. So I want any transaction where the type is donation and the date received is between January 1st and December 31st. So I'll click filter. 67 transactions, and I just want to export that for my accountant. So we'll select the columns that I want to export. I'll choose donor because that includes some handy donor information like full name of the donor, the phone number of the donor is included, and their address, just in case that's useful. Date received, definitely want to show them that, and total amount. That's all they need. We'll click next. And I'm not going to give it a fancy name. It's going to an accountant. They're used to funny names like this. We'll save it. So that's how you can filter a list from here and export it from fundraising.
Now that Elsie has taken you through some common filtering use cases, it's time to put it into practice. We've linked some articles below for some extra reading and to spark a bit of inspiration. As always, you can reach out to us directly at support@keela.com if you need any assistance along the way. Happy filtering!